At this point, we transition to our featured speaker and program. To introduce our speakers in a moment, I'll invite President-elect Beth Knox with Classification Business Consultants and Services to the podium. But first, just a little bit of fun fact about Beth. During her vocational time in our community, she's worked at the event producer One Reel. She served as the CEO for the Seafair Festival. She conducted, with about, I think it was 4 days' notice, a Super Bowl parade down 4th Avenue, and she produced the Special Olympics USA Games, which was no small feat. I was pleased to serve as Best Seafair Festival board chair in 2012, and I continue working with Beth today to bring future athletic events here to Seattle. She's assembled a powerhouse panel for today's program. During our Q&A segment for the panel, club member Kathy Williams, with the classification of banking, will be our roving microphone handler here at the Westin. So if you have a question, be sure you raise your hand and get Kathy's attention. Our club sergeant-at-arms for the day, the multi-talented John Steckler, will recognize the Zoom questions from our Zoom participants. So if you folks put your questions for the panel in chat, John will be steadfast in his eyes on that screen. And now to introduce our panel and today's main program, here is Beth Knox.
Thank you, President Jimmy. I have been so excited for you all to see this panel today. You're in for a real treat, and I fully expect you to leave today feeling inspired and hopefully empowered to lean into your role in Rotary and how you can benefit from that servant leadership mindset. I think it's important today to start with just a little bit of history before I introduce our guests. Back in 1978, 44 years ago, the Duarte Club in California had its charter revoked by Rotary International for allowing women in its club. A suit was filed in the LA Superior Court and finally went to trial in 1983, where a state judge refused to reinstate the club's charter. The club immediately appealed, and 3 years later, the appeals court reversed the earlier decision, which Rotary International immediately appealed. Now, meanwhile, amidst all of this controversy, the Seattle International District Club, that was only 2 years old, secretly voted, so they wouldn't lose their charter, to admit 15 women. And then they too joined the Duarte Club and filed a suit against Rotary International. Jesse, I believe you were part of that club, right? Yes, you were one of them that voted, so thank you. And finally in May of 1987, almost 10 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court of Appeals of California, in a 7-0 opinion, affirmed the decision in favor of the Duarte Club to allow women in Rotary. Right? And just 2 months after that, Sylvia Whitlock began her term as the first official woman president of a Rotary Club in Duarte, California. The next year, Sylvia was joined by Seattle International District President-elect Carolyn Van Soest at the International Convention in Philadelphia. And in 1989, the Rotary International Council on Legislation officially voted to change the Constitution and bylaws to admit women. So a long journey, but we made it. So I hope that sets the stage for today's panel. We're going to focus less on the prior exclusion of women and more about how these three leaders here have embraced the opportunity to serve. And I think that you'll find that what motivated them are the things that we all can relate to and hopefully be inspired by. So let's meet our panel. These women are all high performers with amazing backgrounds, but I'm going to try to compress their truly amazing bios so we can hear from them more directly. And I also want to leave lots of time for questions, which I know you're all going to have. So we're going to start with, on my far left, Vijya Patel. Vijya was born in a small 300-person village in India and moved to Seattle as a young girl. She's been working in real estate for over 25 years and manages her own business of Madison Avenue Realty. She sees her role as a consultant for her clients to help them make one of the biggest decisions in their lives. Vijha grew up with the principles of giving back and is passionate about building community. She has dedicated herself to nonprofits like Operation Night Watch, and WCA Angeline House. She's been serving meals to the homeless community and with her circle of family, friends, and clients for nearly 20 years. And in 2008, Vijha became a member of the Seattle International District Rotary Club and served as president in 2013-2014. She was district assistant governor and is currently the Peace Fellow Subcommittee chair. Now, Rachele Bouchand, her classification is consulting business. She has over 20 years' experience working with multi-generational wealth and currently serves as managing director of Pathstone, where she's responsible for advising families and single-family offices on wealth management and estate planning. She's a member and past president of the Bellevue Rotary Club since 2009. She was a member of the Rotary International Next Generation Conference in 2014 and served on the Global Polio Finance Committee. She currently serves on the Rotary District DEI Committee and Strategic Visioning Team. And I'm personally very excited that Rachele will be the Assistant Governor for Seattle 4 beginning July 1st, as it will mean that we get the chance to work together. And she will also serve as District Governor for 2024 to 2025. And the third member of our panel is Dorothy Bullard, our very own Seattle 4 member. She received her BA from the University of Washington, a law degree from Boston University, an MBA from the University of Washington's Executive MBA program. She's a distinguished practitioner and senior lecturer for the University of Washington's Evans School of Public Affairs. Her previous roles include CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Seattle, South King County, Chief Operating Officer of Harbor Properties, Inc., and as an Assistant State Attorney General. She has long been involved in community service, chairing Washington's Rhodes Scholar Selection Committee, the Unity Project, Washington State Public Lands Advisory Committee, and she served on the Seattle Human Rights Commission and numerous civic and academic boards. Most notably, related to today's program, Dorothy served as the second woman president of Seattle 4 Rotary in 1987. All right, now let's get down to it so we can hear from our panelists. All right, welcome all of you. I'm so pleased that you could be with us today. So let's just start by setting the stage for your involvement in Rotary. Dorothy, let's start with you. And I know that you mentioned that you had 5 different business classifications during your time here at Rotary. Tell me a little bit about why you joined Rotary, and has it turned out to be what you expected?
Sure. Are these on yet?
They're on.
Can you hear me? My classification when I started was ski area management, because I was, among various things that I did, I was president of Stevens Pass, Mission Ridge, Ski Ashland ski areas. So that just gives you a sense of this odd trajectory. I did join Seattle for business reasons. I was, the old-time members of the club know I came with great skepticism. I read Babbitt the weekend before I started. I came into a club that was 5% women, and there was a great awkwardness at tables during those times because I would always be the only woman at a table. And so I've seen a great evolution. What I discovered was that each of my successive careers were supported by people in this club, and that came directly from my service to the club and mutual respect that was achieved through that mutual service. And my prejudices that I came here with were quickly to fade, as Fred knows, and my longtime pal. So anyway, yeah, I did get tremendous support in all of my careers. Thank you, Bill Center. But what I achieved most was the discovery of this as my small town. And that it had, and most of my time here had nothing to do with ski area management.
Thank you. And Rachele, you have an interesting story. You mentioned that you sort of got tricked into joining Rotary.
It wasn't sort of. I was definitely tricked into becoming a Rotarian. So the story that Beth is alluding to was my sponsor is George Northcroft. I belong to the Bellevue Club, and he came up to me and said, "Rachele, you like to volunteer and be part of the community. You're playing small. You need to be a Bellevue Rotarian." And I thought, that's really nice, George. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I don't want to say no to you, so I'm going to go one-to-one meeting and say, that was just not my cup of tea. But where George really tricked me is before I went to my first meeting, he had me meet one-on-one with coffee with younger women who were members of our club. So at the time, I had no idea that there were fewer than 5 people in our club that were under 40, because we had one-on-one coffee meetings with the people who were under 40. Because in my mind, I was thinking, isn't that club a bunch of old men with funny hats with a secret handshake? I was wrong, but because of that, I went into my first meeting not cold. I had people I knew in the room. I was enthralled with the speaker. I was amazed about the impact of a project, and I became a Rotarian right away.
Well, I love that story, and it's a brilliant strategy, actually. And I also love that he said, you are playing small, you can play bigger. And what a great motivator to live up to your potential. That's incredible. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Vijay, I would like, you have a real passion for community, and you mentioned that to me. And community is a big part of your business. How have you used Rotary to personally develop your career?
Can you guys hear me? So my firm is a small boutique real estate firm, and being small, I wanted to be involved with the greater community, and I thought one way to do that is to be involved in an organization like Rotary. I had been invited to join Rotary a few years before I actually joined, and the timing wasn't right, which then turned out to be right in 2008. And it was just a wonderful way to meet people that really were on the same page as I was in terms of building community and what I thought were similar values. And so it just was great to meet people locally as well as internationally. Being from India, I really love that it's a worldwide organization. And so I've really worked at building communities and networks kind of all over, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you saying that international side of it really aligned with your personal values and interests, which I think it's thinking bigger. It's not just your community club, so thank you for that. And Rachele, let's move on to you. I so appreciated what you shared. You learned from a professional development standpoint by being involved in Rotary. You want to share some of those?
Right. So what I didn't know when I joined Rotary was how much training, leadership development, and mentoring was in our organization. I just thought we're do-gooders. We do good things, we do projects, and maybe we'll network a little bit. But throughout the years, I was really fortunate. Every time I raised my hand to volunteer, I received more training. It was amazing. Every time I put my hand up, I got tenfold what I put in. So my very first year, I was able to head a committee. When I got called to volunteer and be president of our club, I had wonderful training through pets that I was not expecting. I thought, again, it was going to be so-so, but I don't know why I thought that, because you have all these great leaders in their own industries. Why wouldn't the training be world-class? And it really was. So I've been really fortunate throughout my career to have that Rotary training that translates into my everyday professional life. So being able to deal with people, that's definitely something I need to do. And being able to inspire volunteers, that's way harder than when someone has a paycheck. So these are great skills to have, and I'm excited for the next 20 years I have in Rotary.
Not to mention the public speaking skills.
Yes.
That also come with it. And Dorothy, I want to ask you the same question. You talked about that you didn't approach it as so much a professional development, but that trust developed along the way. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, it also provided professional development. Even though I came in at an executive level from my work, I had all sorts of opportunities for leadership development within the club through service from the outset. So there was that, and then there was the trust development, which for me, as a Democrat and as a woman who entered a largely male environment, a conservative male environment, I discovered how much common ground existed. I built so many friendships across political lines, which was very important to me. And I was mentored by many, almost exclusively by men in the early years, because the majority of people in the club were men, and many of those men had resisted women coming into the club. But by the time I arrived, 4 years after the integration, I was welcomed and I was mentored, and and trust was established. And every time I would undertake a project in Rotary, people within the club would volunteer to help me and help the community. And so that established trust as well. And I came to greatly admire the members of the club I got to know.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So you all have heard all of their amazing accomplishments that brought them to this point in their career. And I asked each of them to share some anecdotes of other women throughout Rotary who are also making great accomplishments or have done so. So Vijha, let's start with you. I know that you actually did a little research to find, to highlight some of these women. Do you want to share some of those stories?
Yeah, I'd love to. One of the things that you learn about Rotary is it's a vast organization, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like a massive university. And, but some of the ladies have mentioned the experiences that you do build trust, and you do find that people are aligned with you in terms of values, and so you find these amazing meetings that you have with remarkable people. And so I wanted to just highlight a few of them. And you may be familiar with several of them, but Nancy Hughes, who's the founder of Stove Team International. And so just a few sentences about her is that after the death of her husband at the age most people retire, Nancy witnessed the damaging effects of open fire cooking firsthand and vowed to make a difference. She transformed a small Rotary Club project into the organization Stove Team International for her work, she has been honored as a White House Champion of Change and many other honorariums. And so what these stoves do is they eliminate smoke inside the house by almost 90%, also reducing respiratory infections and other issues. The number of burn victims are greatly reduced, and wood gathering is reduced to 50%, and carbon is reduced by 80%. So that's just one person. Suzanne Griffin, who you may be familiar with, grew up in Oregon. She is a person very involved in Iran and Afghanistan. In 2002, she received a sabbatical from Seattle Community Colleges to research ways of improving literacy skills of Afghan women. When she arrived in Kabul, she was assigned a larger role in rebuilding the country's educational system. Suzanne has spent over 11 years there leading projects in health, education, and higher education, and continues this work today. Saida Salah, who is in my Rotary Club. She's an honorary member. We helped her with a Zanzibar I won't know how to say that name properly, but public restroom project. Saida is from Zanzibar and became a Rotarian, hoping to improve the lives of her people. She would work at women's shelters here, and so she could have the flexibility to go to projects over there in Zanzibar, and she would take public transportation here. She'd save every penny, because her goal was to use every bit of funds that she made here in America to be used in those projects. And when you do the currency rate change, of course, that's lots of numbers there. So that's just a few people that
thank you.
have done amazing work.
And Dorothy, you have some, I think, too. You knew of a folk.
A couple come immediately to mind. Nancy Slater, our centennial president, who helped launch the anti-malaria project and draw in the Gates Foundation with its massive funding and focus, and so many volunteers in our club who have participated in that endeavor following our success in polio eradication around the world. So that's one. Then Kathy Gibson, first woman in our club to become a district governor with a big impact on a variety of areas, racial justice being most notable to me.
Yeah, thank you. Rachele, do you have anything to add? I mean, there's so many that we could talk about.
These are not Rotarians, but it's a Rotarian project. So as you mentioned, I was on the Global Polio Finance Committee, and one of the things that come to mind are the workers that are, the social workers that were going door to door for each house to vaccinate children. At first, it didn't work when we had men working as those volunteers and as those aid workers. And what they found was they had to go mother to mother and to instill trust. And I nameless, countless women who are in the front lines of combating polio, which hopefully is almost or will be eradicated once we find the final numbers.
Yes, thank you. All right, my final question, and I would want to also encourage all of you to, if you have questions, please be thinking of those. Kathy Gibson had a great setup for this question. We often focus on when did we join Rotary, but the better question is, when did you first become a Rotarian? Dorothy, do you want to kick us off with that?
I became a Rotarian the day I was introduced by Neil McReynolds. He had just started the Environment Committee, and that had not been my area of focus in the community, but he assumed it was. And so he asked me, would I please join this committee? And I was a good little worker, and I like to please bosses, and I went to work and became very active in that committee, and our chairman was not very active, so by the end of the year I was named committee chairman, and it flowed from that into the board and vice president and president. But it was from that very that initial conversation with Neil that led me to start building a whole group of friends and associates, and it never stopped.
And Rachele, how about you?
So my first year in Rotary, I don't want to say I was always tricked, but this was another one where I thought our president was mistaken. I chaired our adoption support committee, which helped kids in the foster care program where their parents have given up their legal rights and they were looking for their forever homes. So at the time, this is before my husband Blaze, I was single, no children. I think I babysat twice in my life. So I told our president, President Rich, I think you have the wrong person. I don't have any experience with children, and I'm brand new to Rotary. And he said, no, I know who I'm talking to. You're organized. You will have support. There are people here with the experience in childcare, in the foster system, all of these different things. We need a project planner, and you can do it. And because of him, that's why I keep volunteering, and that's why I'm a Rotarian. He gave me that opportunity to grow my wings and be a good volunteer, and then increase my leadership skills. So that's when I became a Rotarian.
And really connect with those people around you and make yourself stronger. That's awesome. Vijha, how about you? Do you have that moment?
You know, I jumped right in. I think like these women, you know, you take something on and it leads to something else, and it builds relationships and trust, and it's great. I did want to just mention something. I went to Portugal for the Seattle for the international conference before your presidency. When you do that, and I met a gentleman there who was from Northeast Canada, and he seemed to have this passion around, like, why aren't there more women in Rotary? Why aren't there in higher leadership levels? And he kind of kept bringing it up. And I want to say maybe David Babanik, you were there at the same time, and I think you might have met him as well. And for me, coming from my background, I think I sort of naively assumed Rotarians were not sexist and we're not racist and we're not, you know, all of these things that we come to find out we're just part of the societies that we are from. And so he was so passionate, and that was back in the time when just blogging was just starting, and there was an invite from Rotary to start blogging. And so he was doing this blogging around this issue, and it wasn't terribly well received by you know, RI. I'm sure he sent letters to them, and we continued to stay in touch after the conference. But I think that continued my passion, sort of sparked this desire to just continue that conversation. So as we're invited to leadership events and, you know, to continue our growth, I would always bring up, what are women doing? What's going on with women? And are we going to have a Rotary International president that's going to be a woman? And finally, I think 10 years later, we will be having one this next year.
I know, it's so exciting.
It is very exciting, so, yeah.
So, well, I know that you all have questions. We have so many great stories here. So, John, we'll turn it over to you to...
Yes, to your mic, and Kathy's going to take the best, and if you two could share up here. Kathy's going to go out into the crowd to get some questions. I'll start with one of the first Zoom questions. Actually, it's from Sue Nixon. It's for you, Dorothy. Okay. She'd like to know, what was the most memorable part of your year as president?
Oh, that's easy. 9/11 occurred during my year. Choked up. It happened on a Tuesday. We revamped our whole meeting for Wednesday. We had scheduled Perry Lorenzo. Some of you, the old timers will remember the wonderful speaker from the opera, and he revamped his whole talk. He spent the whole night on the phone trying to find out if a friend had survived the attack on the Trade Center. And what was so striking about that day was we were at the town hall, which we hardly ever were in, and we decided we'd do a patriotic song at the outset, a patriotic song at the end, and standing on the stage watching Rotarians singing together at that moment of great national unity that was exemplified by the members of this club. That was, for me, the most powerful moment, and that I will always remember.
A lot of us remember that meeting. It was a great meeting.
David Woodward has a question.
This is really great to have you all here today, and I just wonder if you could give us all a sense of how we're doing as far as becoming increasingly inclusive, Rotary in our district as well as internationally, and how can we do more of that so that it is increasingly an inclusive organization of in every sense.
I'll take this one. Thank you, David, for the question. You know, sometimes the answer is complicated and simple at the same time. So let's talk about what we can do. I think one of the easiest things that we can do is make sure that we get the word out that we're welcoming. You know, if you see someone in the room that you've never seen before, whether it's a brand new Rotarian in this club or a visitor, make sure you go up and say hello. I mean, those are like the basic things. And then spread the word. I think as Rotarians, we're not the best at sharing all the great things that we do. It's inspiring what we do. And just make sure that we go out to people, let them know that they're welcome, let them know that we want them here, and show them by example that we have different voices at the table. I think when we do that, we're stronger, we have better perspective, but it starts with that first piece of when you see someone new, strike a conversation and welcome them.
add something to that. During my year, I sought to engage young people and tried to convince the classification committee to loosen the restrictions on entry into the club, and I failed. But Ralph Monroe, who succeeded me, he succeeded in creating the young Rotary professionals classification. And what it did is it allowed us to recruit young people who were leaders in the making. And that helped us integrate the club more rapidly with both women and people of color who might not have been admitted with the more strict classification when all of us were CEOs or managing partners, et cetera. So we lost some of our clout by making that change, but we became a much more diverse club as a result.
Virginia has a question.
Hi, thanks everybody. Can you recall how you felt when you first learned that Jennifer Jones was nominated as our Rotary International president?
Well, I was like, oh, it's about time. Honestly, it was that. It's been a long time coming. And then I just wanted to say for David Woodward's question, I actually was talking to friends that are very involved in diverse communities, and one thing, we look around and it's not a very diverse crowd today. I don't know who's in the audience, and if you really want diversity, you have to go to where people are, and you have to culturally educate yourself to that and not feel like you're different, but you got to get with the program with that. And so it will not change otherwise. I mean, to ask people from different diverse backgrounds to become like you is like, it's really hard. I know all the adjustments I've made growing up to, I have a very different background than people that may have been raised in a different way. And I think, having a way to have these conversations is really, really important. And so those conversations aren't putting anyone on the spot. They're just, learning. They're just like over dinner or just something very casual. I definitely think that's very important and necessary. Rotary is a more formalized organization, and a lot of that is so good. It's so important to have that framework, and it works well. But maybe loosen some of that, as you've mentioned, might be one way to welcome some other demographics. So.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you for the questions.
Thank you.
So for those of you that were waving your hands and didn't get your question in, I would encourage you to approach the panelists after the meeting, and I'm sure they'll be glad to receive and share their thoughts. So Beth and panel, in recognition of your panel's time with Seattle 4, we've contributed to Harvest Against Hunger, a Rotary District 5030 project, as well as a nonprofit which provides healthy meal components to regional food banks. 600 servings of fresh produce have been given in honor of your Women Blazing Trails in Rotary presentation today. We'd like to thank these underwriters of our meeting recordings. We call them gold sponsors. Each week, not everyone is able to come and hear it either online or in person, and so we have an archive that goes back about 10 years now of the recorded programs, and some of you will have additional hits on this just based on the title of your program today. So Liz Powell with a classification of real estate and Bob Alexander with a classification of insurance are our gold sponsors. We're also joined this week by our audiovisual provider, Live Oak Audiovisual, and we thank them for their contributions to meeting quality.